Greetings, Ranger fans, Jake here for a deeper look at episode 24 of Power Rangers Dino Fury, The Festival. But first, a rapid run-through. Let's kick off the counter. It's morphin' time! Okay, so we open on Area 62, where a mysterious creature shuffles in. Wreckmate's back! He starts explaining how he survived destruction, but Slither doesn't care, and the two nearly come to blows until Void Knight interrupts and orders them to fight the Rangers instead. Most defeated Rangers win. Slither thinks he's got the edge with his new super potion, but Wreckmate snags it for himself, and the villains teleport out just as Zato and Ion teleport into their base and discover that Solon and the other Rangers have a surprise for the Rafconians. Happy Triple Sun Festival! They treat them with gifts of a motorcycle for Ion and brand new Dino Chucks for Zato. Short for T-Rex Energy Phase Weapon Strike Prototype 5X. Too powerful to test in the base, so they instead go to flip the Flargon Cakes, except for Ion, who totally plays with the Dino Chucks, naturally losing control and smashing them into a cabinet just before a double Sporks alarm goes off. Let's split up. Izzy, Javi, and Ion fight Slither, Mucus, and the Henchmen, while Zato, Ollie, and Amelia go up against Wreckmate, who uses Slither's supercharged potion to swab the deck with them, leading Zato to return to the base for, BRB, and have his Dino Chucks, which give him a brief edge before malfunctioning on the final strike, forcing them to retreat and recover while Wreckmate goes after their teammates, shivering their timbers and sending them running too. 6-0 Wreckmate. Zato, Solon, and Ion check the Dino Chucks while the others recover, and Ion comes clean after they fry Solon, and she finds her cabinet full of spare parts fried by his goofing around. Sound effects not helping Ion. They consult the legendary database for Ranger weapon inspirations. Clip show time. Fire Smasher and Sonic Fin are no-goes, but after seeing the Shark, Savage, and Megamorph cycles, Ion offers up his bike to be modified into a new weapon. But they gotta be really fast! Because Wreckmate's return, so Ion volunteers to keep him busy using his electro battle armor, buying time as the robot finishes the last of the potion, but before Wreckmate can finish dropping the anchor on the Gold Ranger, Zato zips in on the new Dino Fury cycle, which looks nothing like Ion's bike, so those were some really fast modifications. Forcing Wreckmate's retreat, so Ion and Zato return to their base to find their teammates fully recovered and ready to dive into some Flargon Cake. Literally. No hands allowed as they devour their Triple Sun Festival treats. Roll credits. And that's the end of the episode. Now, let's take a deeper look. I have to say that I really did not expect for the legendary database from Unexpected Guest to make quite so many return appearances. First giving us a history lesson on Lord Zed back in Old Foes, and then popping up again here to give us something of a mid-episode mini-clip show on the Rangers' weapons. Something that has frequently been an element of full clip shows in the past, but never the main focus, and certainly never spanning multiple seasons. Starting with Making Bad during Season 2 of Power Rangers Beast Morphers, we've started witnessing a fascinating new trend of using clip shows to function as little mini history lessons on the Power Rangers franchise, much like Legacy of Power and Power Rangers Dino Thunder. And honestly, I think it's kind of a great idea. Much of the target audience has never seen these past seasons, and this is a solid way to build up hype to go back and watch them within the context of the current series. Plus, this saves us from the redundancy of just rewatching clips from a season that we're already clearly in the middle of streaming. Now, the story surrounding that mini clip show is a bit on the thin side, but as a framing device for an explicit focus on the Rangers' weapons, it is appropriately action-packed, with the fights against Wreckmate feeling like an almost relentless and seamless mesh of Sentai and original footage. Seriously, this episode is definitely designed as a showcase for the stunt cast, who are going to town on these fight sequences, choosing not to linger on any Kale Explosion-style wirework moments, but instead just having Wreckmate deliver blow after brutal blow with barely any breathing room. If this were a fighting game, Wreckmate's player would be button-mashing those combos hard. And honestly, the visual effects surrounding his attacks feel like something out of a fighting game. However, for an episode so heavily focused on Ranger weapons, I will admit the fights do go a bit light on the already existing arsenal of the Dino Fury Rangers, which has genuinely felt quite expansive up to this point, especially with their wide array of boost sleeves and battle armor. For the most part, this can be largely forgiven, due to the highly fast-paced nature of the fights and lack of supporting Sentai footage, but considering the focus on examining past arsenals, it's actually a bit surprising that they make no mention of their own. Especially since establishing Wreckmate as fireproof, spellbreaker-proof, and black hole-proof would have ramped up his threat even more, even if it was only discussed through dialogue. Plus, discussing armors would have been a great opportunity to incorporate some Battleizer clips, and who doesn't love Battleizers? The efficacy of the battle armors in particular is relevant during Wreckmate's battle with Ion, as the Electro Battle Armor allows him to put up a shockingly good fight, ultimately only losing the upper hand after the effect of Slither's potion wear off, which feels a bit counterintuitive. I feel like just a few tweaks of dialogue and a minor shift in the balance of the American footage of this battle would have better justified Zato staying behind with Solon to work on the Dino Fury cycle, instead of just joining Ion with his own blazing or cosmic battle armor. Obviously, he couldn't have actually joined the battle that way without subverting the Sentai footage and sacrificing the introduction of the shiny new toy, but I think you get my point. Sometimes additional justifications are necessary to make the use of the source footage work within the context of the story. I will admit, though, that these are fairly minor nitpicks that would simply serve to punch up the fights that are already quite engaging and compelling. And I do understand the choice to have Wreckmate lose his power-up before the end of the episode to achieve a sense of resolution on the threat, even if it does somewhat undermine the introduction of the new Dino Fury cycle. And I will also admit to not being a huge fan of this introduction, as the heavy use of CG and non-diegetic backgrounds is a bit jarring and takes you a bit out of the scene, with the extended race across red-tinged wastelands really disrupting your sense of where Zato is relative to the rest of the scene, right up until he is actually barreling down on Wreckmate. Also, Solon, I know that you said that you didn't have any of the parts needed for a cycle, but then where did that giant third wheel come from? That thing definitely had a massive third wheel right on the front that was definitely not a part of the original motorcycle. Nor was that giant silver dino head. And if the big appeal of having a motorcycle was the firepower of the plasma blast, where did that part come from? Are you expecting us to believe that Ion's original motorcycle just so happened to have the parts they needed for that? Or did Solon just have the parts for a plasma blast already, and they just didn't think the weapon would be cool enough without being attached to a motorcycle? Also, considering how fast they assembled not only a nigh unrecognizably complete remodel on Ion's bike, but also an entire launch tunnel out the side of a mountain, I'm starting to wonder how much of this was already built in advance, and whether the only things they actually took off Ion's bike were the tires for the back wheels. Begging the question, was Solon just trolling Ion to get revenge for messing with her stuff? Because I see you, Solon. I see you. Which brings us to our moral of the day, a simple but solid lesson about respecting other people's things, which is both well suited to the story and applicable to audience members of all ages, even if it is fairly obvious and unsubtle in its execution. However, one facet that is particularly nice is how this negative behavior is first modeled by our villains before being exhibited by our heroes, with Wreckmate stealing Slither's potion well before Ion borrows Zato's Dino Chucks, further telegraphing to young audience members that this is inappropriate behavior before we even get to see any of the consequences. Sort of similar to how Bulk and Skull acted as anti-role models in early seasons of Mighty Morphin, just with fewer frosted baked goods. But perhaps one of the nicest elements of this episode is the titular festival, introducing yet another aspect of Ravcon culture into the series and further fleshing it out into quite possibly one of the most well-developed alien cultures in the history of the franchise. We've had Rangers from Aquitar, Triforia, Eltar, KO-35, Miranoi, Zybria, Sirius, Mercuria, Andrasia, Sentai 6, and the Lion Galaxy, yet rarely have we ever had any insight into their homeworld celebrations, delicacies, animal life, or hierarchical structures, let alone getting a chance to see all of those elements get actively incorporated into the story of the show. Like, we had a full team of Alien Rangers, and I cannot think of a single Equation cuisine. But this is the second time in 3 episodes that Flarkin dessert has been actively plot relevant. For most Power Rangers seasons, Ravcon would simply be a bit of tragic backstory, or an excuse for one of the characters not to understand basic human customs, or an excuse for some random superpower, and while, yes, it does provide all of those things, the writers have also gone out of their way to build it up as something far more than that. One key piece of Zato's character has been his desire to reconnect with his home planet, and thanks to extra details like these, the audience becomes invested in this goal as well, not only due to caring about Zato, but also due to being able to see Ravcon through the eyes of him and Zion. I mean, come on, don't you kind of want to try some Flarkin cake now? Although apparently Amelia was the only human to actually like it, and considering her general defining trait is a love of weird stuff, maybe I should rethink that. That being said, this episode is definitely a bit of an odd mix of ingredients, as most of the major plot elements fall into a number of the more bland Power Rangers storytelling tropes, being an action-heavy episode, having a simplistic moral of the day, and being a clip show, along with the main thrust of the action being reliant upon a Ranger making an obviously bad choice, and a villain returning with no explanation and gaining a near equally poorly explained power-up. But many of these blander elements are balanced out by the additional flavors, with much of the action being exceptionally strong, the moral being well aligned and appropriate, the clip show being both brief and unique, and the framing being centered around a very different form of world building. However, Ian is still on the verge of having to learn his lessons about listening one too many times, and Wreckmate's deliberately unexplained return, while a cute nod to the poorly explained return of his counterpart in the source material, is now part of a running gag of unexplained villain returns started by Mucus and Slither that could easily wear thin for some people. I suppose that, just like with Flarkin Cake, it really all comes down to a matter of taste. So make sure to join me next time for a deeper look at episode 25 of Power Rangers Dino Fury, Missing Pieces. And if you would like to share this week's rapid run-through, you can find it as a standalone clip over at Morphin Legacy's YouTube channel. Please like, share, subscribe to us both, ring the bell for future notifications, and until next time, farewell Ranger fans, and let the power protect you.